So as you know, tonight is a Q&A night, and before we begin, inshallah, receiving the questions on Menti and giving the opportunity, inshallah, for everyone to ask, inshallah, their questions, and we'll try our best to answer them. There's just a couple of points I want to begin with. Yesterday in our Q&A session, as a human being, we are not perfect, and our answers may not always be measured properly, especially when they are on stage or impromptu, where we are not prepared ahead of time to answer them, but we answer them to the best of our ability. So sometimes we may answer a question, it may not be very clear, and it requires further clarification. Sometimes it may be taken or received as offensive, so I apologize if any of the answers were offensive to you, inshallah, in any way, shape, or form, especially with respect to questions that were related to our dear and respected sisters. If I have offended anyone, please forgive me. I, of course, do not mean to offend anybody, but again, it's our human nature that we may forget, we may, due to, of course, I would blame my ignorance and my lack of preparation for that. But there's a couple of points to highlight in this regard in terms of some of the questions that pertain to the stigma on women who are not married or who haven't got the chance to get married yet. I don't like to say older women because people who haven't got the chance to marry are not necessarily older people. They're still, inshallah, they still have their potential of being married soon, inshallah. And maybe part of the answer was received yesterday that there's a blame, for example, on the sisters. Maybe the way I said it sounded like the sisters are not doing their best to find the perfect spouse, but that's not the reality. The reality is that our sisters are not to be blamed for this. This is something that first and foremost is rizq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there's other factors that are involved in it, mainly, which is a reality that is unfortunate that we find especially in this country. I'm not saying the other parts of the world doesn't have it, but we also suffer from that here in this country, is that many of the mu'mineen or young brothers have shied away from the principles and values of Islam and have adopted a Western lifestyle. For example, we mentioned yesterday how some of them began to prefer a non-hijabi, for instance, where we know that is absolutely setting up someone's marriage for failure. If you want to start a family, you definitely need to start it with somebody who's observing hijab, with somebody who's religious, as hijab is wajib. We all know that. And the lack of responsibility that some of the young men have shown that made these sisters not want to accept such suitors. And I don't blame a sister to reject these suitors that are do not meet their standards. And here I'm talking about the moderate and normal standards. We're not talking about excessive standards. Every sister has the right to choose a person who is right for her, someone who is righteous, someone who is responsible, someone who is respectful, someone who appreciates a wife and appreciates a woman, appreciates a partner, not someone who wants to just get married for the fun of it, but rather to start a family and to be a loyal and a sincere companion and spouse and friend, so on and so forth. So really there's no blame to be placed on sisters that haven't got the chance to get married. The brothers in the community, outside of the community, Muslimin, Mu'mineen, that are interested in getting married and starting families need to take this serious, that there are sisters out there that are filled with wisdom, filled with taqwa, but they're not willing to compromise their lives or compromise their values and accept any suitor. I don't blame them for not accepting such suitors. So we have to work on ourselves. The males that want to get married need to consider this, that if you want the right spouse, you need to exert as much effort as you can on yourself to be responsible, to be respectful, to be more practicing, so that Allah can grant you the tawfiq to be married to such women who are righteous and who are worthy of all respect. The other issue that came up was regarding to hijab. Now we know, of course, hijab is definitely wajib upon the sisters, and there's no exception to that. Hijab is one of the clear wajibat in Islam, but also male hijab is what has been not touched upon or has not been highlighted enough, either on the minbar here and other manabir, but in general, most of the time our focus is on female hijab, and we tend to shy away from talking about male hijab, whereas Islam does not only talk about female hijab, it also mentions male hijab, although it has a different understanding or different meaning. And I want to refer to some of the examples when I talk about male hijab. One of these examples is the way we appear on social media. Men, although technically there are certain areas of their body that must be covered, and with other parts of their body, for example, they may have more freedom, but there's something that is called muru'ah, something that is called modesty, something that is known as respecting and preserving one's dignity and self-respect. For example, it is permissible for me as a man, for instance, to wear shorts, but if I were to come inside the center wearing it, it would be absolutely disrespectful, because I would be infringing the sanctity of this place, right? Infringing the sanctity of myself as a believer. Now, there are certain ways that a man can dress in that can be a reason or a cause for provoking lustful thoughts from the opposite gender. And here we have a verse that is very important in Surah Al-Ma'idah that says, يا أيها الذين آمنوا وتعاونوا على البر والتقوى ولا تعاونوا على الإثم والعدوان. We have to cooperate on goodness and righteousness, and we must not cooperate on sin and aggression. Which means that when we ask our respected sisters to observe hijab, because that way we don't have distractions, that way we are more protected from lustful thoughts and so on and so forth. On the other hand, or on the other side, we have to also consider that the other gender, the sisters and the females, also have feelings and also need us to be modest in the way we appear in front of them. You know, those who, for example, like to work out in the gym and they like to have a built and a fit body, of course there's no problem in doing that, but you don't have to post your pictures without a shirt on social media. That's not necessary. We have to be mindful and respectful that there are people that are watching our posts, there are sisters, and we don't want to be a reason to make their life difficult. Yeah, you want to feel confident and feel good about yourself, and you want to take selfies of your progress. Do that without posting it. Take pictures, buy a nice mirror, stand in front of it all day. Nobody's going to tell you anything. But you don't have to post that on social media. You have to have this mutual cooperation on taqwa. Just like how I lower the gaze, the sister's supposed to lower her gaze. She's supposed to cover herself to the extent that doesn't cause me distraction. I do the same thing. I have to present myself in a way such that it doesn't also create any issue and cause distraction. So really this issue is vital. It's very important to understand. Just because you're a male, it doesn't mean that you can walk the way you like and you can appear the way you like. There is something that we have to be considerate of. Our sisters have a right upon us, and we have to be very, very respectful and considerate of their feelings. Now, there's so much that can be said. I don't want to, make this a lecture. I just wanted to highlight these few points, and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us all the success and the tawfiq to gain more of this wisdom, inshallah. And to conclude, I want to once again apologize for anything that could have been misreceived or could have caused anybody offense, inshallah. Of course, again, it was not meant, but inshallah, if there's anything I didn't cover, please feel free to send it via menti so that I can, inshallah, clarify it. Please. Yes, my respected sisters, today you have to take the lead and starting your questions, because our respected brothers have been taking the lead for the past night, so we definitely have to give you the lead.
السيد السؤال هنا في ورا ما sisters على الملاحظة مالت taking pictures of themselves.
إن شاء الله هسه أنا أتذكر بس الأخوة الأخوات. تفضلوا أختي تفضلوا. Go ahead. عليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. Ahmed, you didn't turn it on for them.
Just mute. Just unmute it.
Okay.
تفضلوا عليكم السلام. تفضلوا حياكم الله.
This is coming from me as an educator, and I taught in the public schools, and now alhamdulillah I'm teaching at an Islamic school.
MashaAllah.
And just me seeing the difference for myself as an adult, how it affected me spiritually, being in the public schools and now how I'm in the Islamic school, how can you please emphasize the importance for the spirituality of our children to be in that Islamic environment, because I feel like there's not enough support from the community, and there's more of a negative attributes put into the Islam, like they are putting a lot of criticism on the Islamic school, saying, well, they don't teach enough up to this level, and not really looking at the effect of their spirituality and how, let's say, okay, you can go to another school and maybe the math program is stronger, the science program is stronger. If you put them in the Islamic school, you can fill certain gaps, but the ethics and the spirituality, you can't counter that, what they're getting in a non-Islamic environment. And it saddens me to see the lack of support in general from the community. So if you could just please talk about that.
Ahsanti. In fact, this is one of the most dearest and nearest messages to my heart that I speak all the time with people. It's something that is that, as we say, it lives with me. The importance of Islamic schools. For fuqaha, jurists, our ulama and maraja, if you look at their code of practice for Muslims in the West, Fiqh al-Mu'talibin, which was issued back in the 90s, late 80s, 90s, there are clear question and answer by Sayyid Sistani that many people have not paid attention to. He's asked if we place our children in a school and there's a good chance that this will affect them spiritually, ethically. He says it's not permissible to keep them in that school. It's haram, period. Not makruh, haram. Therefore, you have to find an alternative. When I talk about effective listening last time, this is a good example. I will walk out of the center in a few minutes, and then somebody would come and tell me, for example, you were talking bad about education. You want our children to be ignorant and to remain home. And that's not exactly what I said. That is absolutely what I'm not saying. I'm not saying take your kids out of school and keep them home so they can be ignorant or uneducated. But what we're saying is there are alternatives. You have a school that caters to your needs, that has a great spiritual environment in it, that is now wajib upon you to be part of that school, to support that school, because that is your only resort and your only means of preserving your children. It's no longer an issue of, this is a higher level math or a higher level science. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to ask you on the day of judgment, did you teach your child a higher level science or higher level math? Again, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying don't excel in science and math. You can be the best person in science and math, but not at the expense of your deen, not at the expense of your religion. You know how many parents and families that have lived here for longer and longer, their children are now doctors in other cities, in my city, for example, in cities neighboring to my city. They are so regretful as a 60, 70-year-old. Why are they regretful? Their son is a doctor, their daughter is a doctor. They're like, we focused a lot on giving them the education, but unfortunately we did not pay attention to the Islamic aspect. And now my doctor's son, my doctor daughter, has no relationship with Islam. I wish I had gone back and rethought this, and I would rather have them just have even something basic, a basic degree. They don't have to be a doctor, but at least they have deen in their life, they have religion in their life. Why do we wait until it's too late? Why can't we do this from the start? Right now there's a school, let's support it. Let's get in the habit, because if we don't support it, it's not going to grow. But when we support it, when we send our children, it will grow, it'll eventually grow. And by the way, let me tell you something. When people get out of high school, I was once in high school, so I remember, when people get out of high school, you find that those who got out of high school with probably the lowest point GPA, and those who may not have done really good in high school, they have a chance to change that in their community college years. They can change that into a 4.0, enter medical school and become the best. So don't worry about that part. They're not going to be doomed because they didn't get the best math class or the best science class or the best chemistry class. It's okay. You'd rather keep their faith and their spiritual foundation preserved, and then if there is shortage in their understanding of math, there's a deficiency in science, there's a lot of tutoring. But if they lose their deen and their spiritual well-being, I'll tell you that it's not easy to cure. I'm sure all of you agree that if somebody right now is 20 years old and has zero math skills, they're still trainable and you can still teach them math. And they can still excel and be the best in math. It's possible. But if they're 20 years old and haven't stepped foot in a mosque or haven't stepped foot in an Islamic environment, it's really hard to bring them to that. Math is something you teach, it's information. You can teach anybody that information. But religion and spirituality is not something that you can just teach to someone in a course. It's something that has to be taught from an early age. It's an environment, it's a mindset. There's so much to be said about this. So I can say that there's no words that I know of that can stress how important it is to support our Islamic schools, specifically the Islamic school that we have here, the City of Knowledge, and any other initiatives. These schools must be supported and must be given the priority. And God forbid, if somebody loses their child, deviates, let them feel that if they were capable of sending them to the school and they didn't, let them know that they are responsible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because they did have the chance to send them to a clean place, but their priorities were a little bit different. Their priorities were science and math. And with all due respect to science and math, but your eternal future does not depend on science and math. It depends on your spiritual well-being. تفضلوا دكتورة. عفوا. We're giving the sisters the priority and then we'll come back here inshallah. تفضلوا دكتورة. حياكم الله.
Thank you, Leila, for opening a topic which is very dear and near to me. And Alwiya Leila al-Bahr al-Ulum, she told me that last year I went to the member and I قيد الحجة على الحضور. She told me that you didn't do it this year, but tonight I have the opportunity. My question is that we sit here and we listen, and a lot of time we listen about ghiba and the dangers of ghiba and the impact of ghiba and all that. That's on a personal level. Correct. If you do my ghiba, you are going to, eat my flesh and all that. But what about doing ghiba for an institution? And the ghiba comes from people, the ones who say that the level of math and the level of science and the level of English, they are not experts in the field. Probably themselves, they cannot put, two sentences together to make a complete, paragraph in English or solve a simple equation in math. There is a very well-known evaluation which is called outcome-based evaluation. You assess an institution based on the outcome that comes out of it. And since, as you detected, the subject is City of Knowledge, I mean, everybody can see the product of City of Knowledge. Every single person in the community can see the product of City of Knowledge. The non-Muslim community, they are all praised for City of Knowledge. The superintendent of Pomona, he said, I wish I can bring my daughter to City of Knowledge.
MashaAllah. MashaAllah.
The Ikhwan al-Sunnah, that we have 50% Sunnah population in the school, they praise City of Knowledge. The thing that stops them, they tell them this is Shia and it's going to change the belief of your kids. And this happens only to the ones who don't enter. Those who enter our gate, alhamdulillah. And the non-Muslims, as you saw Sia the other night, she was speaking. Yes. And the graduates of the school, 100% college matriculation. I have 6 kids of my own. We paid an arm and leg for our 2 older boys to go to web school. And one ended in UCI, one ended in UCLA. We graduated 4 from City of Knowledge, UCI, UCLA, UCSD, UC Berkeley. Every single graduate gets accepted to a UC. They get accepted to private colleges. Full scholarship from Pomona College, and we have here with us, Amin is from Pomona, from the Claremont colleges. And scholarships to Harvard and Stanford and all over. I don't know why people don't see that, but they focus on something like the math or I don't know where they get that. Nobody has come and told me, can we look at your math curriculum?
Correct.
Can we look at your science curriculum? We are one of the top 5% STEM schools. We have so many, the school has achieved so many milestones, but unfortunately you still hear the negativity from some people. And believe me, I'm talking here not out of fear for the school. The school will do what it is doing.
Allah's protecting it. Allah's protecting it, inshallah.
I have seen, believe me, I have seen in my short life and with my own eyes the guardianship that Allah has guarded this school. Okay? But my fear is for the people. For the people. Destroying all the things that they do because of something which doesn't even, I don't know if it really تنفعهم.
Yes, these people, by the way, that you mentioned riba, and I think it's not riba, it's actually buhtan. It's a little bit more than riba. It's harder than riba. Because riba, as you mentioned, a defect about someone, it's there. No, there's no defect, but you're attributing a defect. What we call those people, with respect to what you've mentioned, قطاع الطريق إلى الله. In English, those who impede the way to Allah. When there's an institution that attracts people to the way of Allah, that preserves the well-being of our children, and I go and I talk negative about this institution, and people right away leave it and shy away from it, what I'm doing here is impeding these people, and they will hold me accountable on the day of judgment. Now, for the people that hear people give negative comments on an institution, don't be too naive. Just don't believe anything. If somebody comes and says that about your own family member, you're going to investigate and take it serious, right? But when they say it about a school, some people just want an excuse not to go to the school. Oh yeah, we've heard that the math level is not up to date or whatever. You heard, but you've never went to the school. You've never met with the principal to ask them. We do so much homework when it comes to our financial transactions in our businesses and our whatever money-making strategies. But why is it when it comes to our children's well-being, we are ready to believe anything that is being said? Oh, the school, the quality is not the best. Okay, thank you for letting me know. I'll just keep them in public school. So public school has a better quality? Do you know that public schools, even with respect to math and science, they're struggling? Public schools are not any better if we want to talk about math and science, let alone the other issues that they are facing today, inculcating this LGBTQ in the minds of our children. Alhamdulillah, at least these places like City of Knowledge and the rest of the Islamic schools, they have no tolerance for this indecent behavior and this indecent, mindset. They make sure that your child is praying when they're in school. They're receiving ethical nourishment. All these have to be appreciated. And like Dr. Sheikhli said, the math and the science there is not something that, as people hear, is not up to date or not at the level that is desired. It is. And to prove that, there are people that have been graduated from the City of Knowledge who are very successful and have been accepted to great colleges. So let us not get into the idea of what is known as murjifin. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used to dispraise some of the Sahaba in Medina who were called murjifin. They were from the hypocrites, munafiqeen. These people would put down the energy of Muslims by spreading false information. Don't go to war with the Prophet, don't go do this, they're going to do this to you. They always try to put people down. And this is the same thing here. You have an institution that is functioning, you have an Islamic center that is functioning, but you have someone who's crossing their legs together and saying, but this school, that, and by the way, I can tell you that person has never sent their child to that school, has never stepped foot in that school. So they're talking without any knowledge. When someone says the math level is this and that, you tell them, have you ever sent a child there? Nope. Have you ever been there? Nope. So how do you say this? I don't know, I heard, I assume. And that's where these people unfortunately go wrong. So inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will continue to guide and to give the support to City of Knowledge and the rest of these great initiatives. And may Allah bless the founders and those who are running it. Dr. Sheikhli, Jazakallah, you're doing a great job. May Allah bless you and bless your efforts, and all the staff that work with you, inshallah. Yes, Abu Ammar, Dr. Aziz.
سيدنا أنا زرت كل الدول الإسلامية.
نعم.
وأكبر دولة إسلامية هي إندونيسيا، تعرفون وين إندونيسيا؟
The majority of Muslims are Indonesian, correct?
يعني ما أقدر أقول هالكلمة. شنو الفرق بين السني والشيعي؟
فرق كبير طبعا.
اسمح لي،
نعم.
كل ما رحت دكان نوبات بعضهم يسألني أنت سني لو شيعي؟
نعم.
قلت له احنا كنا مسلمين، يسكت. فإذا سألك واحد شو الفرق بين السني والشيعي؟ شنو جوابك؟
الجواب هو أن المسلم الذي يسمي نفسه أنه شيعي هو في الحقيقة مسلم اتبع الثقلين بعد رسول الله، اتبع القرآن الكريم وعترة النبي وآله. والمسلم الذي يدعي أنه سني هو الذي اتبع السنة التي حكيت له عبر بعض صحابة رسول الله، وإن كانت مخالفة للذي جاء عبر الأمناء على حلال الله وحرامه وهم الأئمة عليهم السلام. فالقضية قضية منهجية، هنالك النبع الصافي منهج الثقلين القرآن والعترة، وهنالك المنهج الذي فيه ما فيه. فالشيعي هو الذي يتبع هذا المنهج الذي رسمته وخططت له السماء. الله أمر النبي أن ينصب 12 إمام من بعده لحفظ الدين. جاء مجموعة من الناس وحرفوا المسيرة وانتخبوا أو لنقل عينوا من لم يعينه الله تبارك وتعالى، وسارت الأمة على هذا الخط المنحرف، وولدت المذاهب الكثيرة، وأصبحت الأمة متشظية بسبب هذا الانحراف الذي جرى. لذلك طبعا نحن لا نريد أن نلقي اللوم على إخوتنا وأحبتنا ممن يسمون أنفسهم بأهل السنة. هؤلاء إخواننا بلا إشكال، بل أنفسنا كما يقول السيد السيستاني. الكلام ليس عن الأخوة، لابد أن نفرق بين التعايش والمحبة والأخوة الإسلامية وبين العقيدة والقيم والثوابت. السني أخي أحبه ويحبني وأضحي له ويضحي من أجلي، ولكن عندما تصل القضية إلى المعتقد لابد أن أكون واضح معه وأن لا أساوم، وأن لا أقول مثلا بما أني أحبك فأنا أتنازل عن معتقداتي لك، وأقول لا يوجد شيء في الإسلام اسمه مثلا فرق بيننا. الذي يقول أنه أنا فقط مسلم لا شيعي ولا سني، اسأله كيف تتوضأ؟ إذا توضأ بالطريقة الشيعية ولا يتوضأ إلا بهذه الطريقة فهو شيعي. إذا توضأ بالطريقة السنية ولا يقول أن يتوضأ بغيرها فهو سني. إذا هذه القضية أنا لست بشيعي لست بسني ما لها واقع، لأن في الحقيقة هو لابد أن يكون إما وإما.
حتى الجامعات الراقية في أمريكا كل جامعة لها
curriculum. أحسن.
Different. It has to be different.
Yeah, so the curriculum, as he said, the brother said, or the method, المنهج, right? المنهج يختلف. The methodology between the two schools is different, and we cannot say that although they are different, but they're the same. They're not the same.
They are not. إذا كان السنة يتبعون علما يتبعون.
يتبعون بعد رسول الله بعض الصحابة الذين تصدوا للحكومة كأبي بكر وعمر وغيرهم، ولا يتبعون الثقلين، أي بمعنى القرآن بتفسير العترة، القرآن بمعية العترة. نعم يأخذون من القرآن ويأخذون من الصحابة وربما يأخذون من بعض أهل البيت، لكن هذا مزيج وليس صافي أو ليس خالصا وراجعا إلى هذا النبع الذي جعله النبي صلى الله عليه وآله حجة على المسلمين من بعده. نعم، وهذا الموضوع تطرقنا له قبل ليالي، لا أريد الخوض فيه الآن بشكل. تفضلوا حجنا. Please go ahead.
Could you please translate the doctor's question?
Yeah, so the question was regarding the difference between Shia and Sunni, saying what is the difference, and I was saying briefly that it's there are two different approaches, there are two different methodologies. You know, the Shia is founded on the fact that the Holy Prophet was commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to appoint 12 divinely chosen successors, to appoint 12 imams who are infallible, who are pure, to preserve the message of Islam. Whereas the other school, the Sunni school of thought, does not accept that. They believe that the Prophet left this world without appointing anybody, and that the people chose Abu Bakr to lead, and therefore they take their Islam and their ahkam and so on and so forth and their values from the companions, irrespective of whether they were with Ahlul-Beyt or against Ahlul-Beyt. So really, our understanding of Shia Islam is that it is the actual Islam that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted for this ummah. Yes.
Actually, this was my question tonight, and hopefully doctor asked them.
MashaAllah.
Yeah, this doctor was my professor 50 years ago in
MashaAllah.
college.
MashaAllah. MashaAllah. So he was your teacher?
Yes,
MashaAllah.
the
MashaAllah.
best classes you could take.
Alhamdulillah. May Allah bless him and bless you, inshallah. Allah bless you. Salawat for Hajj Dr. Abu Ammar, please. And man dua, Muhammad. Ahsantu. Thank you. So the mentee, inshallah. Ahsantu. ناس يجوز ناس يا
Last night, this is about the last night topic. I had to leave when we were talking about Musa alayhi salam. وحرمنا عليه المراضع. And now I was just thinking about this today. For example, when we think about any prophet or any messenger, about their lives, accomplishment, whatever, I don't think it comes to mind that, oh, who breastfed that prophet or who breastfed that messenger, except in the case of Musa alayhi salam, because of the circumstances.
Correct.
It had to be. But when it comes to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we see a lot of inaccuracies and falsehoods about the way he was brought, that his mom Amin alayhi salam was not able to breastfeed him, and the fact he ended up with Halima Sa'diya and she's the one who breastfed him, which is false, as you stated last night.
There's a difference of opinion among historians on whether this happened or didn't happen. Yeah. The general Sunni understanding of history, they say that's how it happened. But some of our Shia scholars do not agree with that.
Right, because as you said, the Prophet has to be breastfed from a pure...
from a muwahhida at least,
yeah,
from a monotheist, right?
Right.
Someone who's a believer.
Right.
Ahsantum.
Right.
Ahsantum. Jazakumullah. Thank you so much. So, sisters, let's go back to the sisters because we want to make sure we're giving them enough chance to ask, inshallah. Please, if you have any questions. عليكم السلام دكتور تفضل خدمتك.
I have a question. I know I'm going down a slippery road, but can we elaborate? I had a heated discussion with a dear friend, and they were talking about before the Risala that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam worshipped idols, and I know, and I don't have the fund of knowledge to support that. And then they even went as far as his parents were, because that's all because Islam had not been sent down, the Risala has not begun. So can you just elaborate on that, please?
Thank you so much for this is important. So first and foremost, we have to know that the Holy Prophet ﷺ is the best human being that Allah has chosen. Jibreel, who's an angel, who has never at one point in his life, of course, worshipped an idol. When he reached the seventh heaven, there was a point that he could not cross. He says, "Oh Rasulullah, you're the only one that can cross to that point." So we have to understand that the Holy Prophet ﷺ is not just a normal prophet or normal person. He is the purest and the nearest and dearest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, there is no way that this great prophet could have ever faced an idol or worshipped an idol in his life. Especially that we know the Quran mentions the Holy Prophet. It talks about him and that he is the response of the da'wah of Ibrahim. Ibrahim has made a da'wah. وَبْعَثْ فِيهِمْ رَسُولًا إِلَىٰ آخِرِهِ. He sent a messenger from among them. So the Holy Prophet cannot be a person who would ever worship idols. Otherwise he would be from the ظالمين. لا ينال عهدي الظالمين إن الشرك لظلم عظيم. Shirk is a great dhulm. Anyone who has done any form of shirk in their life has committed dhulm. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to Ibrahim, when he says, will any of my dhurriya receive this covenant, this special ahd of imamah? He says, لا ينال عهد الظالمين. So how can a zalim, somebody who has done shirk, even in one day of their life, receive this very high status? خاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين وأفضلهم. How can that be for someone who used to worship idols? If he came to invite people to the way of Islam and says, you need to stop worshiping idols, you know what they would tell him? Weren't you with us yesterday worshiping idols? Why are you coming to tell us to stop doing what you were doing yesterday? Plus we have historical facts that say he was always going to Ghar Hira and he would worship, and he was never seen worshiping an idol. Even the others, his opponents testified to this. He was never seen doing that. So therefore, this unfortunately is false information, and it's not true that the Holy Prophet has ever worshipped an idol in his life. وَتَقَلُّبَكَ فِي السَّاجِدِينَ, as the Quran says. And one of the tafasir that, your parents and your ancestors are all from the muwahhideen, from the sajideen. The other thing is his parents and grandparents. We have a fundamental belief in Shia Islam, which the other brothers from the other school do not accept and do not agree with us with respect to. And that is that all the fathers and forefathers of the Prophet and his mother has to be monotheist, have to be a muwahhid. They cannot be a person born from a mushrik. And we have our adillah, of course. It's not the time to lecture and highlight the riwayat and highlight the verses and the arguments and the explanations. But overall, it is a fundamental belief in Shia Islam that the fathers and forefathers of the Holy Prophet have to be a muwahhid. And this is one of the differences. For someone who says, what's the difference between Shia Islam and Sunni Islam? There are many differences on an aqidah level, on the understanding of aqidah and beliefs, and on a practical level. One of them is this. So if somebody says there's no difference, no, there's a difference. One says the Prophet was a muwahhid from day one. One says the Prophet has fathers who are also muwahhideen, and the other says no, the fathers of the Prophet were mushrikeen. So that is definitely a major difference between the two schools. Yes, brother Amin, go ahead.
My question is coming off the false information, because sometimes people use the suspect that the Prophet may be, looking at idols without having proof, So we're in a current age now where a lot of false information, disinformation is being spread, and my question is a little funny.
It's okay. No,
but we're in a current age where artificial intelligence is making a huge rise.
Yes.
And I think one of the big, all the scientists around it, all the philosophers, everybody who's working on it says human beings need to be aware when artificial intelligence has the capability to spread that false information. And I know in the Quran it tells us to yatafakkarun, like you do
to think, to reflect. وَلَا تَقْفُ مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٍ. Do not follow that which you have no knowledge of.
Yeah. Can you talk about this when it comes to Islam and critical thinking, like this ability we have?
Exactly. We have this very important saying that we all remember from Al-Hasan alayhi salam, when he was asked once, what's the difference between haqq and batil? And he said, 4 fingers. Haqq is what you see, and he didn't say all of what you hear is batil. He says most of what you hear is batil. Why? Because some of what you hear is true. Which means that not everything you see on the news, on social media, you hear from people, you right away accept it as, oh, okay, so that's the truth. No, we have to verify. We have to verify, especially critical information. How can we verify when it comes to medicine? Usually you don't consume a pill or a medicine without verifying that this is indeed the right medicine. Do you just go and say, okay, somebody on Instagram says take this pill twice a day and you'll be relieved from your pain? Usually you don't do that. You go, no, this is a risky thing. Let me consult my doctor. But why is it when it comes to religious matters, we take it very lightly and accept whatever is posted here and there? So it's definitely important to verify, because Allah will ask us on the Day of Judgment. He will tell us that you had the means to verify. How come you did not verify? But tabayyanu means verify. Yes, sisters, please, go ahead. Go ahead. Doctor, go ahead, sorry. Unmute, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it was the first night or second night. Somebody asked about if you wake up late, like you have a minute or two for Fajr prayer. Now, is there any part of the Fajr prayer that you kind of drop? What are the basics that you must do for the Fajr prayer? Very good.
Not just Fajr prayer, any prayer. There are things that are mustahab that you can take away, especially when you don't have time. Number one, iqama and adhan, of course, they're mustahab. So you begin by Allahu Akbar. The other thing is the takbirat between qiyam and ruku', between ruku' and sujood, between sajda and sajda, astaghfirullah wa atubu ilayh, between the two sajdas, taqabbal shafa'atuhu warfa'. All these things, of course, are mustahab. So if you stick to the bare minimum, it shouldn't take longer. You do the Fatiha, you do the surah. In your dhikr of ruku', you can do the minimum. Subhanallah, subhanallah, subhanallah. Same thing with sujood. When you go in ruku and sujood, you don't have to say Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali. You can also take that out because it's not wajib, it's also mustahab. When you do your shahada, you can begin right away. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. When you get into the salam, all you have to say is Assalamu alaikum. Or Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, even better. But you don't have to say Assalamu alayna wa Assalamu alayka ayyuha nabi wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, because this is not even a salam, it's just a tahiyyah that is mustahab. It's not part of the salam. Salam begins when you say Assalamu alaykum. Or another version, Assalamu alayna wa ala ibadillahi salihin. But if you just say Assalamu alaykum, that is also enough. So this is to like make it very short and summarized, to take out all the mustahabbat. It would be very, very short, and it can be done in a very small amount of time.
بالتشهد عندما لا تقول اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد هل الصلاة باطلة حقا؟
طبعا لا، الصلاة على النبي وآله في التشهد واجبة.
في التشهد
نعم نعم لا لأن هذا من التشهد.
إذا
لم يذكرها عمدا فالصلاة باطلة. أي لذلك أما سهوا لا تضر.
بس إذا عمدا
العمد تضر. لذلك قال قائلهم الشافعي في أبياته المعروفة: يا آل بيت رسول الله حبكم فرض من الله في القرآن أنزله كفاكم من عظيم الشأن أنكم من لم يصلي عليكم في التشهد في الصلاة لا صلاة له. نعم.
يكفي ركعة واحدة الاتيان بها لإدراك.
نعم. قضية أخرى دكتورتنا الفاضلة بالنسبة لإدراك الصلاة في الوقت، عندنا قاعدة في الفقه: من أدرك ركعة فقد أدرك الوقت. يعني إذا ركعة واحدة صارت داخل الوقت، حتى لو الركعة الأخرى، الركعة الثانية الثالثة الرابعة صارت خارج الوقت، هو يعتبر أدى ولم يقضي. أحسنتم أحسنتم.
سيدنا
Yes.
احنا نقدر نجمع الصلاة.
Yes, we can.
ماكو فرق بجمعها أو في وقت.
You can do each salah in its time. تصلي كل صلاة بوقتها، الظهر والعصر والمغرب والعشاء. And you can also join. يمكنك الجمع بين الظهر والعصر والمغرب والعشاء. أحسنتم. Sisters, questions on your end?
Assalamu alaikum, Sayyidina.
حياكم الله.
I just heard recently regarding the chewing gum.
Yes.
We're allowed to have it while we were fasting,
Yeah.
but it cannot have any taste to it. Is that true?
So the idea is not taste. So let me clarify this. If something goes down your esophagus, that's the problem. That's when your fast becomes invalid. Anything that you put in your mouth that does not come to the esophagus, and you don't swallow it, there's no issue in it. As far as gum that has sugar and taste, usually because it produces that juice is going to be swallowed and it's going to do what? Break your fast. So you're letting some small sweet juice mixed with saliva coming down your throat, that would invalidate the fast. But if the gum has no flavor, you know how we call this? That one, as long as you don't, create a lot of saliva from it and swallow it, just normal chewing, there shouldn't be an issue. But again, one should be careful not to do that and think that because it's okay, I'll do it, because they don't know. At one point they might make a mistake and end up swallowing it or swallowing something. So it needs to be careful. But just like tasting, tasting food, you can taste food when you're fasting, meaning you put it on your tongue, but you can't swallow it. Or chew it for a child. We even have that in the Risala. You chew it for a child. For example, a mother's feeding her child who's a little, she chews it for him, and she doesn't swallow anything of it. So as long as nothing is being swallowed, then there's no issue. So for example, some people have heart condition, may Allah cure all of them, they place a small pill under their tongue, right? Well, they're not swallowing it, it remains under their tongue and, it enters the system somehow, but it doesn't go down their esophagus. Go ahead, Abu Hussein.
السلام عليكم.
السلام.
عندي مشاركة بس صغيرة. أنا وعائلتي كنا ساكنين بفلوريدا قبل لمدة أكثر من 10 سنين. فمستقرين هناك كأصدقاء. السبب الوحيد والله لتحويلنا لكاليفورنيا هو City of Knowledge.
ما شاء الله.
والله.
جميل.
زوجتي لحت عليه كثيرا. شفنا فيسبوك جروب أو post about City of Knowledge with some announcements. So we started reading. Then my wife, she told me. Then I went to the website. It's a simple website. It's not like but I read the address. So we decided. I have my house. Leave my house. Leave my friends. My community. A lot of friends in there. I just abandoned them. And I came in here starting like after 11 years.
You're considered a person
Because of City of Knowledge.
Yes, you're considered an example of man yuhajiru ila Allah wa ila Allah. You're a person who has done hijrah in the way of Allah. This is a great example of hijrah.
And honestly, like I did, like we were, living there is cheap. I mean, it's not expensive as California.
It's different.
But again, to the point where Dr. Halima, she was saying about mathematics, I'm a software engineer, meaning mathematics is my
math is your thing.
So when we hear this rumor, so my wife, she came into me. I'll be frankly, I'll talk like زوجتي جاءتني قالت لي كيف هيك قلت لها بابا أنا مهندس يعني أنا اختصاصي رياضيات. I ordered 2 books of mathematics.
No.
And I was teaching my kids. There is no difference between any other school. It is just something like women probably separate things that had no idea about.
Pause this.
Yes.
I don't agree with you.
I'm sorry, no, I meant what some.
Know that you have an attorney here.
Okay, yes, you're right. So anyway, I'm sorry about this, but the rumor that got in there about this has no foundation at all.
Yes, it's not based on true information.
Yes. And I have no idea how come, like, I see people live in California, probably live in Pomona, and yet their kids is not in there. That is something I don't want to, investigate, but I'd really like to sit with someone and say, how come you guys live in here, a few blocks away, and then you don't let your kids attend that school so that you can become a stronger community?
No, this is important. Honestly, this is very important. People who have children, especially young children, it's no longer an excuse for you, honestly, especially if they're starting their school. You have a treasure, make use of it. Ahsanti. Yes.
A few comments. One of them regarding City of Knowledge. I agree with the comments that my brothers and sisters said about City of Knowledge. It is one of the best institutions here. Alhamdulillah wa shukr, we have one of the great institutions here in Southern California, City of Knowledge, and I believe Allah said, قِفُوهُمْ إِنَّهُمْ مَسْئُولُونَ. So, in the hereafter, day of judgment, Yawm al-Qiyamah, we will all be asked. And if we are not supporting City of Knowledge in any way, shape, or form, even if my kids are not in City of Knowledge, but I support City of Knowledge, with speeches, with everything. So, I think it's, I'm not talking about myself only, but I think there's a lot of brothers and sisters who are supporting this school. I think it's wajib, it's not something that is...
It's actually wajib kifai. Wajib kifai. These initiatives, just like how when you come to this community and there is no Islamic center, you felt the responsibility of creating a center in the name of al-wajib al-kifai. Same thing. When you know that if without a school the children are going to deviate, it becomes wajib kifai. Those who have enough means, enough contribution to come. In fact, we know our ulama even authorize, with the permission of the jurists, a khoms ijazah for these initiatives. Why? Because they say sahmul imam is to be given, with the permission of the jurist, to that which pleases the heart of the imam. I don't know personally of anything that pleases the heart of the imam more than the school and schools that cater to this, to our children. I'm not saying this because I'm trying to commend anybody, but that's the reality. It is more important than anything else that we do.
إن شاء الله أحسنتم. أيضا تدخل باب الأمر بالمعروف
والأمر بالمعروف والنهي عن المنكر. أحسنتم.
That's my first comment. My second comment is regarding what Amin said about the artificial intelligence, because nowadays we all, not all of us, but most of us use what's called ChatGPT, and this is part of OpenAI.com, which is Open Artificial Intelligence website, and this is based on the amount of knowledge that is fed through the internet from 2015 until the end of 2021. So whatever said, whatever written, whatever translated and transpired in the internet between 2015 to 2021 was captured by this amazing artificial intelligence tool or platform, and it's very fast in spreading out the
but
information.
It's also biased. There are some issues that are biased, especially against Muslims. There was a test done recently when you put certain words that have to do with Islam and Muslims, usually the bad things come out.
Exactly.
So we have to be careful too.
So that's why that's exactly what I'm trying to basically warn people that not everything you read from the ChatGPT has to be the best or the most accurate thing. So
and it's not the source of knowledge, especially with Islam,
Yeah.
Islamic knowledge. It's not the source of knowledge that we are that is hujjah upon us. It's a means like Google. We go to Google, but we have to verify. So artificial intelligence basically speeds the process. It tells you there's information, but you have to ask, where is this coming from? Where is the link? Which website? From which book? From which alim? So on and so forth.
So inshallah, we are all encouraging people to search for the information from multiple sources and verify it and not fall as a victim to what you read. So the third one is regarding the comment that you brought up for the male hijab and the fact that some brothers, they go to the gym and they take picture for their muscles and they want to post it. The danger in taking pictures for their muscles and being their ujub about themselves,
conceit,
and that in itself, it actually water the seeds of ujub inside the human being. And those brothers and sisters who went to Hajj, they know that one of the muharramat is looking in the mirror.
Yes, because to avoid that conceit.
Exactly. So we have to be careful about and educate our kids about admiring their bodies and their muscles. Because that will lead into gradually, if it's not,
Iblis was a victim of his ujb, right? He was very conceited about his worship, and this is what allowed him to believing that he's better than Adam. So indeed, having that extra excessiveness of taking selfies and looking at oneself and posting and expecting the likes makes a person feel like they're a celebrity. That's another issue in addition to the hijab aspect. Ahsantu. Menti, please. Yes, ahsantu.
Assalamu alaikum. Quick announcement, there's a white Honda SUV. It's blocking the way in the back. White Honda SUV.
مو ماسك يعني عندي مو ماسك لا انا هيك رحت
وانت بلغتك صارت وين احسن الظن بأبي حسين احسن الظن
First question from Menti says, can you address the pitfalls and subpar moralities of men before marriage, which is why females are not settling to marry them? The community needs to highlight this issue more, so please shed the light.
Yes, ahsantum. Thank you for bringing that up. Some of the youth, unfortunately, have adopted this mindset, and I think we alluded to it yesterday, some brothers talked about it, the mindset of, I want to become something big in no time, and I want to be someone who is famous or someone who is well off financially, but through, of course, any means, even though they are wrong means. And some of these people, unfortunately, have been very inspired in a negative way by what is known as rappers. Some people, unfortunately, look up to certain celebrities and rappers as a role model. They like to dress like them, act like them. It leads them to doing the same thing they're doing. Now, these rappers, unfortunately, they promote indecency, they promote vulgarity, they promote all kinds of wrong things. So not only it's haram to listen to it because it's unlawful music, but it's also unlawful content because it spreads indecency. So some of these youth, unfortunately, or young men, some of them, they are affected by this and they feel that this is how they want to live their life. So for example, they would engage in drug abuse. For example, they would dress and appear like these role models to them, like these rappers. They don't act responsible. They don't use the correct form of speaking in terms of saying, not using, for example, vulgarity and so on and so forth. That, of course, puts a lot of red flags. No sister, no woman who wants to be, with a good husband or starts a good family, wants to be with such a person who is in that type of way, someone who is looking up to rappers, someone who is not serious about their life, someone who's not responsible, someone who has entered into many relationships prior to their marriage. I'm talking about unlawful relationships. Somebody who's so used to dating all kinds of people that come across their way. Of course, that woman doesn't feel safe being with someone like that, because someone who's been doing this, they're going to come back and do it again, even if they're married, because they're so used to it, and that will create problems for them in the house. So therefore, these are some of the, unfortunately, some of the qualities, the negative qualities that some men have that make women more fearful when a suitor comes. That's why they verify, they ask, and they say that, you know what, this doesn't meet the standards. This person is, they're not practicing, they're not righteous, they're not serious. And of course, there are other qualities. I can't really highlight every single quality, but there are different deficiencies and various negative qualities that some men have shown that scared many of the sisters away from accepting and agreeing to be into marriage with them. Yes.
Second question, can you address the effect of social media on the portrayal of religion and compromising hijab for both males and females?
So we know, for example, that social media is a reality. We can't deny that. I mean, we can't tell people, for example, delete your social media. It's kind of hard to do that. But we can say to them, first of all, minimize your social media platforms. You don't have to have 10 social media platforms. Stick to one that you receive your news with, that you stay in touch with your relatives, friends, and so on and so forth. But you don't have to really have all types of social media platforms. That's number one. Number two, the consumption of social media needs to be limited. It can't be something that is ongoing from day to night. And the other thing is, we are not necessarily encouraged to take pictures of ourselves and post it. There is really no need to do that. I mean, think of it. What do you want to get out of putting your pictures on social media? What is it that you're trying to get? If you feel that you're a celebrity and that the whole world wants to see your pictures between time and time, then God forbid you have fallen in the issue of conceit, and you need to treat yourself out of that. If you want to put it because you want others, for example, to give you a like or a comment, what's the point? What would that add to you? Now, going back to hijab when it comes to social media, as a believer, man or woman, we have to think twice before we put any picture on social media, because sometimes this picture, if it's a reason or a cause for provoking other people's lustful desires, then what we're doing is spreading indecency. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يُحِبُّونَ أَن تَشِيعَ الْفَاحِشَةُ فِي الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises them hellfire, promises them severe punishment. Why? Because they're promoting and encouraging some level of indecency. Even if it's not full indecency, but at least some level of indecency. For example, if someone goes on social media and all they see is, for example, pictures of women who are not wearing hijab, or they're wearing partial hijab, men who are revealing their bodies and so on and so forth, what will that give them? What impression? The impression would be that this is normal. And they see it every day, so this is normal. What they do? Children growing up thinking that this is how you need to dress, and therefore it will create that moral decline in society. So we are participating in the spread of this moral decline by posting pictures that meet the standards of these social media platforms. So safer and better not to post our photos and pictures, and be more realistic and not waste time on doing that and fall prey for these social media platforms and their negative use.
So, again, a quick announcement for the, it's a white Honda Pilot. White Honda Pilot, it's blocking the way. اخوان سيارة هوندا بايلوت بيضة سادة الطريق بالخلف. شكرا.
Okay, it's gone. They said, is it gone? Okay. Okay, it's gone. It's already gone.
Okay. I think you answered the question yesterday, but I'm gonna go ahead and read it. Okay, it says, can you discuss the hijab requirements for me? Too often women are shamed for the way they preserve hijab, but men get away with being shirtless, wearing right clothing. Wearing right clothing else.
Yeah, so we said earlier that there are certain clothes that if a man appears in, it would be a form of provoking lustful desires for females. And they need to avoid that as a way of cooperating on taqwa and not cooperating on sin. And we mentioned examples. Going shirtless is not only immodest, it's also it violates one's respect, self-respect. We should not, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the dress to cover ourselves, to beautify ourselves, not to show our body in front of other people, especially when it creates that negative effect of provoking lustful desires. So indeed, men have to try their best to not show their body, especially again on social media or in front of others. Can we say that it's absolutely a sin if a man walked out without a shirt? Technically, I can't say it's a sin for sure, because they might say, well, the marja that I follow, the fuqaha, say that I only required to cover a specific area in my body, and that area is not included. But ethically speaking, respectfully speaking, this is not the way a mu'min should appear. In fact, we have a hadith that say a mu'min should not wear tight clothes to that extent. They should wear some good loose clothing. They should maintain as much modesty in the way they dress as possible. We're talking about men. We know the Prophet in the Ahlul-Beyt, what did they used to dress? He used to put a turban on. I'm not saying you wear a turban. What I'm saying is they put many clothes on them. They wouldn't just walk out, for example, wearing pants and a shirt. They would never do that. Although it was there, people did wear these things, not of course the same style that we have today, but they were what's called sirwal, where the people wear that, and they would wear some qamis on top, long shirt, and they would go. But the Ahlul-Beyt were not satisfied even with that, because it gives you that level of respect when you continuously have your body more covered and more formal in the way you dress. As far as sister goes, or sisters in their hijab, of course their hijab is known. They have to cover their body with exception to the face and the hands below the wrist, and of course nothing too tight, nothing that reveals their body structure or shows anything that would provoke lustful desires.
In Jannah, there is no such a thing as a time, like seconds, minutes, hours, past, present, future. Then, what is that?
The law that governs Jannah is something that we still don't understand. Because the Akhirah is a life that is not based on the confinements of time. So no matter how much we explain, it's not going to be easily fathomed and digested. What we know is there's khuld, there's eternity. We will be there forever and ever. Meaning that time would not be a thing there. I mean, we still would feel that time is going by, but it's not something that will be having an end that we are looking forward to. We will live there as if there is no end, and there is no end. And that mindset that today we have is due to being born in this dunya and being confined to the laws of this dunya. But when you're in the akhirah, that mindset and that trap or that circle in your mind that says time will no longer be there. Therefore, you will not even think about time when you're in that position.
What is Islamic viewpoint on IVF, in vitro fertilization, and freezing eggs? Many times these frozen eggs are not used and eventually have to be thrown away. Is it Islamically allowed?
Yeah, so when these eggs or whatever sperms are frozen, if after a time they want to throw them away, there's no dalil, there's no proof from Islam that you can't throw them away, because they're not considered a child, right? They're not in the womb of a mother where we can say that's considered abortion. It's not considered abortion, right? It's basically like somebody has taken out from their body that liquid, mixed it with something else, placed it in a freezer. That doesn't make it a child. That doesn't make it a fetus. It still has the potential to be one, but as long as it's not back in the rahim, it doesn't have the ruling of a fetus, and therefore it's not considered a problem to get rid of it. Now, the process in and of itself is problematic from the perspective of a couple of reasons. Number one, a male or a female cannot expose their private parts in front of either a male or a female. So for example, a male can't expose themselves to a male or female, and vice versa. A female cannot expose her privates to even a female. The only person they can expose it to is their spouse. That's it. Anyone other than their spouse, only in cases of urgency, when there's darura. somebody has a serious hardship that cannot be addressed unless this process of IVF takes place and they have to be exposed, then that would be an exception. Just like when somebody's in an emergency and there's a doctor that has to come and check on them and they expose their private area for that reason. But anything other than the urgency and that which entails unbearable hardship is not permissible.
Sorry, technical issues.
Sure, no problem.
What about a routine doctor checkup?
Routine doctor checkup, is it necessary they have to look at the private area is the question.
Like a physical, yeah.
Do they have to look? Because, I mean, we've done physicals in the past, but they don't check the private area. But what I'm saying is it a necessary thing? They have to check the area that cannot be seen. If they have to, hypothetically, they say, you know what, this has to be diagnosed for some reason because to prevent a serious illness, then that becomes darura. But if it's just a very normal checkup and it's not necessary, something secondary, then of course they can't expose themselves.
So in general, are tabi removed? And if so, then how would we want anything? If not, how we would not sin?
If what, can you repeat? If dunya?
In our Jannah is our tabi removed? Can you clarify that?
Okay.
Yeah, if so, then how would we want anything?
I think they're referring to the desire. The desire is not removed in Jannah. You know, our desires, our lustful and the desire to eat and drink is not removed in Jannah. That stays. And that's how we continuously enjoy Jannah in many different ways. So that's not removed. That remains with us eternally in heaven, if that's what is meant by the question.
They can rewrite the question.
They can rewrite it if we have misunderstood it. That would be great.
Say the rules are different in the hereafter. In the Jannah, the rules that governs that world are different than our rules.
Exactly. We say, you know, the laws that govern Jannah, and I'm talking about not the legislative laws, but I'm talking about the laws that govern the world of Jannah or the hereafter are going to be different to an extent. That's why the comparison is usually very hard. And the analogies that we give or the examples in the Quran are just a way to understand that there is pleasure, but how the pleasure will materialize, how eternity will materialize, that would be unknown to us until we get there, inshallah.
اعتقد هي مداخلة بس يقول السؤال مو سؤال بس مداخلة الرجاء حث الشابات على الحجاب المضبوط البنطلون الضيق الردن إلى المعصم اللبس الضيق المكياج قليلة وكثيرة حجاب الرأس غير الخفيف عدم إخراج الرقبة إلى ذلك.
أحسنتم. هذه قضية للأسف شائعة في كثير من المجتمعات، وهي أن البعض من الأخوات بسبب الضغط الاجتماعي، بسبب البير بريشر as we say بأسباب أخرى، قد يتساهلون في أمر الحجاب. يعني يظهرون بعض الشعر مثلا، أو يظهرون المعاصم كما ذكر، أو يلبسون المكياج. هذا كله غير جائز وهو مخالف للحجاب. نحن كما تحدثنا قلنا أن الرجل عليه أن يحتشم في ملبسه، المرأة عليها كذلك. As we said, men have to be modest in their appearance, women on the other hand have to also be modest. And the question was advice to the sisters in terms of observing proper hijab. I know this may sound sensitive, or some people take offense to it when you mention it, but we have to say it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants women, the sisters, to be fully covered without showing their hair, without showing their body, and without wearing something tight that reveals their physical body, and not wearing makeup, because that's considered zina. And Allah clearly says in the Quran, وَلَا يُبْدِينَ زِينَتَهُنَّ, and they must not disclose their zina. All this is an example of zina, their hair, their body. Because woman in general is a form of zina, right? She is something that Allah has made to be in such way that is attractive and basically appealing to the opposite gender. Yes, okay.
Relating to IVF, you said it's okay to see someone if it's an emergency. Would the inability to have kids to be considered an emergency where seeking treatment is allowed?
Ahsantum. So it's not considered an emergency, but in some cases it's considered that it entails unbearable hardship. So people are different. Someone can say, you know what, I'm happy, I don't have children, alhamdulillah, I'll just Maybe Allah doesn't want me to have children because it's in the best of my interest, and they're happy with it. But some people, day and night, they're suffering because they don't have children. It causes them hardship. They can no longer function in life, and they feel very depressed because of it. Then at that point, to lift that hardship, Islam allowed them to take that route.
So, this is a follow-up question from the previous question. It says, so, to confirm, is makeup haram?
Makeup is haram in front of men, non-mahram men. It's just bottom line. The only thing that is halal in terms of makeup is if you're only with girls, or you're in front of your maharim, your father, your uncle, your brother, your husband, and so on and so forth. But other than maharim, it's not permissible, of course. Yes,
بالنسبة للحجاب هو قاعد نشوف كلتشر يأثر عليه وايد.
صحيح.
يعني الإخوان في باكستان الحجاب مالتهم تشكر
ونشوف بإيران مثلا الحجاب مالتهم شوية
ده ينزل يعني
فالظاهر انه هو اكثر كلتشر من هو يعني ستاندرد.
هو cultural trends بس هاي cultural trends or what we call styles if they violate the Islamic rulings they have to be rejected, right? Because there are different styles of how we dress and how we appear, but some of these styles are not within our values, they conflict with our values. So this is why a righteous man and a righteous woman always does not give preference to their cultural trends and styles over their religious values. It's a test. We're all tested here. This life is not a place of convenience, it's a place of test, and we will be struggling. There is pressure. Think about the Anbiya and the Awsiya and the great women in history, how they suffered from the pressure of their society. People were killed because they had a belief in Allah or they were trying to maintain their religious values. Alhamdulillah, today nobody's killing us here, at least in this country, for having to embrace our religious values. It's just that the pressure that we receive from surrounding areas, and this is where the Islamic school comes back into perspective. You know, especially with respect to sisters, I've seen a lot of our sisters that go to public schools, they have the most challenge to maintain hijab. But if you send them to an Islamic school, that challenge is no longer there.
بالنسبة الجنة ندري احنا عالم حواء كانوا موجودين بيها، ايش دخل الشيطان بالجنة؟ شلون دخل؟
أي آدم وحواء لم يكونا في الجنة. لم يكونا في الجنة، نعم كانوا في الجنة في اللغة كما تفضل الأخ العزيز الدكتور وكرر قبل قليل هو البستان اللي سمي جنة لأنه لكثرة الأشجار فيه يحجب كأنما هو محجوب الأرض محجوبة. فاستعيرت هذه اللفظة واستعملت في القرآن لتعني معنى جنة الخلد فردوس الأعلى، واستخدمت أيضا في القرآن لتعني الجنة اللي كان عندهم القرآن تقول جنتين أو جنتان، جنة اللي مثال ضربه القرآن كمثل
أصحاب الكهف.
لا مو أصحاب الكهف، أصحاب اللي كان عندهم
لا هو بسورة الكهف اللي كان أبو الجنتين واحد.
أحسنتم نعم في سورة الكهف. فالجنة استعمل فمن الجنان التي كان فيها آدم وحواء هو جنة في مكان غير الآخرة في عالم الدنيا، جنة الدنيا. هاي جنة الدنيا أين اختلفت الروايات، بعض الروايات تقول هي في الأرض في مكان جميل وجو معتدل وإلى آخره، بعض تقول لا كانت في كوكب آخر، لكن قالوا يقينا هي ليست جنة الخلد، لأن جنة الخلد في عالم الآخرة من دخلها بعد لا يخرج منها، هي جنة الخلد. لاحظ والشيطان لا يصل إليها لأنه مطرود من رحمة الله، فبالتالي كانت هذه جنة دنيوية وليست جنة من عالم الآخرة. نعم أحمد تفضل. Amin, you had a question or follow-up?
I had a question. So first I had a comment because it's something that when it comes to the hijab, because a lot of times, I went to a public school, so I didn't have when I was growing up, I had the luck of a summer school. But what I've seen a lot of times in public format is that you see a lot of girls actually appreciate when a girl wears a hijab because they say, oh, you don't have to be sexualized. You don't have to take off your clothes, and the girls who tend to not practice hijab, they feel like they're pressured to show off their body more. Whereas a girl who does wear hijab, she practiced modesty and she actually practiced good faith, which shows she has self-control.
Correct.
Which takes her a long way. So those girls I've seen kind of look up to those young girls, you know?
Sure, but there are others that bully them for that too. We
Yeah.
have to take both sides of the story.
Well, not so much bullying, that's kind of what my question is, because I've seen when, even for the young men, if they practice good morals, when they go to college or when they go to the real world, there's exploitation out there, where they see that if they are they see them as perhaps limiting themselves. And they're going to exploit that. You know, they're going to say, okay, if you can't do these certain things, you're not going to do certain things in my environment, you know, like in the college or in something like that. And that becomes a struggle for a lot of young people. So what's, that's my first question, is what's the balance, you know, when you know, we're kind of the minority when you go to college, right?
True,
Especially
but when you're trained throughout your early years in school and through your environment, your Islamic center, your household, all that gives you strong support and strong immunity, such that when you're now in college, you're ready to resist that pressure. You're ready to not allow it to get to you. But if somebody's so vulnerable and prone to to being attacked and not have enough resistance internally, of course that person would be at stake when they're in college, when they're at work, and they're in the outer world. So this requires setting them up for success from a young age. Again, family, school, mosque, and so on and so forth.
That's my second question is, when we have an Islamic school, you know, like say the knowledge, you know, it has good criteria about how you learn deen and how you control your ethics. But what's the age when a young person, you know, what's the criteria of the age where it's like, okay, you need to have this much control? Is it like when they're a teenager, when they're going to high school? Like, what's that age when you know that they have it?
Well, usually when they are, 18, 19, if they have gone through the right schooling, the right training, the right environment, then they're an adult at that point. And now they can make rational decisions. And I'm not saying they're perfect and immune, but they have much higher immunity than those who haven't been in these setups, in these schools, in these types of environments.
Sure.
I said, Menti, go ahead.
Relating to makeup again. How about corrective makeup? It's not noticeable to cover a scar, for example, not enhancing beauty of changing the feature.
Ahsantum. Yeah, so corrective makeup, which in other words cover up, as long as it just hides certain blemishes and is not seen as a form of ornament, then it's permissible per se. Again, it's not seen as a form of enhancement and a beautifier, rather just the covers. For example, let's say I have a bruise, right? And I want to cover that bruise. That's not considered wearing makeup. That's considered just covering a bruise or covering a blemish. But it becomes makeup when it's seen. You can see it as a beautifier. It has beautified and enhanced the image of that person.
Second question. Why do women have to make up their fast when they're not breaking it intentionally? Also, prayer is said to be the most important part of Islam, but we don't have to make up.
Yes, very good. So this goes back to what we call qiyas. We don't have qiyas in Shia Islam where we compare, right? We don't know exactly why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded women to make up their fast, but perhaps because fasting is once a year and prayer is all the time. So imagine if a sister had to make up her salah every month when she misses 6 or 7 or 10 days. Her life will be difficult. So maybe Allah wanted to make her life easy, but when it comes to siyam, because it's once a year, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it that if she misses certain days because of that, she would have to make that up. Again, this goes back to rules prescribed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we have no way of knowing exactly why they were prescribed as such.
Can you explain and clarify how we should view death and our life after death?
So death really is a transition to a higher realm. When we were in our mother's wombs, we were in a very limited world. And if we were to have the comprehension during that time and to be asked, what do you see in the womb? We would have said, the whole world. This is the whole world. But as soon as we come out of the womb, we are shocked to see that there is another world that we have come to that is much bigger than we thought. Because the womb was the world to us. When we leave this world, we're going to have a feeling similar to that, if not more. We will exit a very limited world into a world that is so massive that we can't even, describe. And therefore the shock happens. One of the meaning of wahshatul qabr is not because you're placed in that pit, because that pit is only for the body, right? The grave just conceals the body, but your ruh, when it is entering into a very higher realm, it is in shock, and it needs something to console it. And this is where these salatul wahsha, these a'mal, these sadaqat, the righteous deeds they have done, the shafa'ah of the Ahlul-Beyt, all these things come handy to make a person more comfortable as they transition into that life. They transition into a very higher realm, and of course the laws that govern that realm are still unknown to us, but we know there is joy, there is pleasure, but also there is punishment. So depending on how a person lived their life, if they were a righteous person, then they would transition from this dunya to a rawdah min riyad al-jannah, to a beautiful place. They will be joined with the righteous, just like how Allah described the shuhada, فرحين بما آتاهم الله من فضله ويستبشرون بالذين لم يلحقوا من بعدهم, and so on and so forth. So here you find that there is a beautiful life that's awaiting us after death if we have planned for it, if we have prepared ourselves for it. But God forbid also there's a very scary life awaiting us if we neglected our duties, if we did not repent from our sins. And of course all this remains in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. نطلب نصيحة إلى الآباء والأمهات بالحفاظ على أولادهم من الانحراف والعمل بتجارة المخدرات، وتعريفهم بأن هذا العمل حرام شرعا وإن كان قانون الولاية أباحه.
أحسنتم. لابد أن نفرق بين القانون والشرع. القانون بشكل عام على قسمين. هنالك قوانين تنظم حياة المجتمع وتحفظ النظام، قوانين الطرق، قوانين الصحة، قوانين الجريمة، هذه فقط تحفظ النظام، maintain order. وهنالك قوانين ليست بالضرورة لحفظ النظام، قوانين منشأها بعض المصالح والأجندات وإلى آخره. القانون الذي شرع في مثلا المسموحية ببيع الخمر، والخمر legal ممكن أن يبيعه الإنسان، والقانون الذي يسمح للفتاة أو الفتى بأن يدخل في علاقات غير مشروعة، القانون موجود. ولكن هذه القوانين ليست للمصلحة العامة وليست لحفظ النظام، وإنما هي قوانين مبنية على أسس ومعتقدات ورؤى كونية للمقنن في هذه البلاد. لذلك هذه القوانين الأخرى لا قيمة لها في ميزان الشريعة. بمعنى القانون الذي يبيح الخمر غير محترم في الإسلام، القانون الذي يبيح المخدرات غير محترم في الإسلام، ولا بد أن يجتنب الإنسان العمل بهذا القانون. كل قانون يخالف الشريعة يضرب عرض الحائط، هذه قاعدة عند جميع الفقهاء. ولا قيمة لقانون يخالف قانون السماء. نعم القانون الذي يحفظ النظام لابد من أن نحترمه، نحن في هذه البلاد نحترم قوانين حفظ النظام. أما القوانين الأخرى التي تتقاطع مع قيمنا الدينية هذه لابد أن نركلها بأرجلنا ولا احترام لها ولا قيمة لها. أما بالنسبة لقضية المخدرات فلا بد أن يعلم الأهالي أن هذا الطريق قد يبدأ ويبدو طبيعي، ويبدأ ربما بمشاريع صغيرة، كأن يكون هذا يعمل في مكان يبيع هذه الأمور اللي هي legal، هذا يعني الجاستيفيكيشن والتبرير، أنني أعمل في محل يبيع هذه الأشياء وهي ليست محرمة قانونا لكن شرعا فيها إشكال. فأنت كيف تبيع هذه المحرمات؟ أنت تستطيع أن تعمل في مكان يبيع الخمر أيضا legal لكنه محرم شرعا بيعه ونقله إلى آخره. فلا بد إذن من تحذير الأبناء والبنات من أن هذا المصير سيؤدي بك لا فقط إلى غضب الله تبارك وتعالى، بل مصير الذي يعمل في طريق تجارة المخدرات هو الموت الحتمي. طبعا الموت هنا له أسباب، إما الأوفردوس ورأينا كثير من هذا في المدن والولايات، يعني هذا يأخذ جرعات كثيرة ويموت، وإما حرب العصابات، وهذه خطرة جدا لأن هذا العالم مليء بالصراعات. هذا العالم عالم عصابات، كلما توسع الإنسان في تجارة المخدرات كلما عرض نفسه للصراع والمشاكل مع الآخرين الذين في هذا الصنف، وتصل القضية إلى التصفية الجسدية، وأيضا هذا له شواهد كثيرة. فالأهالي لا بد أن يحذروا ويحذروا أبنائهم وبناتهم من الدخول ويراقبوا أيضا. هذا شفت أنا أمور غريبة، يعني هذا ابني أمس كان في الهاي سكول، اليوم جايب له سيارة جديدة مثلا، ومثلا لم يأتي بها عن طريق مثلا بنك أو رئيس أو كذا جاء بسيارة، عادة هو لا يسمح له مثلا بأخذها بهذا الشكل، ليس لديه كريدت، ليس لديه كذا، هذا مثير. أو أرى أن في يديه أموال ويشتري بنهم، لابد أسأله هذا من أين له ذلك؟ هذا يثير الشك، ولابد أن أتابع وأراقب. فإذا تبين أنه قد ابتلي بهذا لابد أن أضغط عليه بشتى الطرق حتى أحميه من هذا المصير البائس والمصير المقصد. نعم، تفضلوا أبو علي. أحسن الله عليكم.
سيدنا، عندي بعض النقاشات هناك في العراق مع الملحدين، بعض الملحدين.
نعم.
فيثيرون بعض الأسئلة التي لا أجد لها جواب شافي أو جواب وافي. مثلا يقولون فعندي نقاشات هناك مع بعض الملحدين في العراق، فيثيرون بعض الأسئلة التي لا أجد لها جوابا شافيا أو وافيا. مثلا على السماوات السبع وسبع طرائق ومن الأرض مثلهن. نعم. Can you address this like the best answer to answer this
يعني
questions?
أولا من الصعب جدا أن ندخل في تفاصيل الشبهات التي يثيرها الملحدون التي ترتبط بالجانب العلمي، لكن نستطيع أن نقول إجمالا كل ما جاء في القرآن الكريم لا شك أنه من الله تبارك وتعالى ولا مرية فيه، ولكن الملحد قد يثير إثارات أنه هذه كيف تكون، هذه كيف تكون، هذه تبدو مخالفة للعلم. نحن نقول له هنالك نظريات وهنالك حقائق علمية. الحقائق العلمية لا يمكن أن يخالفها القرآن الكريم لأنها حقائق. أما النظريات فهي متغيرة، فإذا جاءت نظرية تخالف الآية القرآنية نحن نقدم الآية لأنها قطعية، والنظرية ظنية ولا يمكن أن نقدم الظن على اليقين. التفسيرات، تفسير هذه الآيات قد أحيانا ينتابه شيء من الغموض. مثلا ما هي الأراضون السبع؟ هل هي طبقات في نفس الأرض؟ هل هي كواكب أخرى؟ فما يقدر الملحد يحاكمني على ما هو يفهم من معنى الأراضين السبع. يقول مثلا بما أنه لا نرى 7 كواكب إذن هذا القرآن فيه خلل. نقول له لا، من قال؟ ربما تكون الأراضون السبع الكونتيننتس، القارات السبع، ربما النتيجة هاي أراضون سبع أراضون. ربما تكون شيء آخر، ربما تكون أبعاد في داخل الأرض. يعني قصدي لا يوجد عندنا دليل قاطع بأن معنى الأراضون السبع هو هذا. أصلا ما هي السماوات السبع؟ هل هي طبقات؟ هل هي عوالم؟ هذه كلها أمور لم يصل إليها العلم إلى الآن بتفصيل وبحقائق واضحة حتى نقول أن القرآن يخالف هذه الحقائق. فإجمالا نقول أن الملحد عندما يثير هذه الإشكالات لابد أن يعرف أننا أمام أسس نبني عليها. الأساس الأول أن القرآن الكريم كله كلام الله. الأساس الثاني أن ليس كل ما يفهم من القرآن بفهمي أو بفهم الملحد هو الفهم الصحيح. يعني ثبت العرش كما يقال ثم انقش. لابد أن نعرف أن هل معنى الآية هو هذا ثم يخالف النظر أو الحقيقة العلمية أم لا، معنى شيء آخر. وهل هذه الذي نسميها حقيقة علمية بالفعل حقيقة علمية أو أنها نظرية قابلة لأن تفند وتأتي نظرية أخرى تحل محلها. القضية تحتاج طبعا إلى أن ندخل في كل جزئية من هذه الجزئيات ونعالجها لوحدها. بس أغلب إشكالات الملحدين مبنية على هذا الأساس. هم يفهمون شيء معين ويطبقون على هذا الفهم ماذا؟ نظرياتهم وفهمهم للكون، فيقولون القرآن يخالف العلم، لكن الحقيقة ليست كذلك. تفضل دكتور.
7 طرائق يقول سبحانه وتعالى 7 طرائق.
أي شرط 7 طرائق عفوا؟
أي 7 طرائق، 7 سماوات، وفي آية 7 طرائق.
نعم.
فما هذه الطرائق؟ هل هي يعني أوربتس مثلا أو
هذا نقول أحسنت. المفسرون خب لابد نراجع لأنه لا يوجد لدينا تحديد دقيق لمعنى الطرائق. تبقى احتمالات، لأن بعض الكلمات مثلا طرائق قد تكون جمع طريق. شنو هاي؟ طرق إلى السماء، طرق فضائية، طرق أخرى. هل هي مثل ما تفضلتوا الأوربت؟ هل هي مجرات مثلا؟ هذه كلها لا يمكن الجزم بمعانيها. لذلك احنا نرجع في هذه الأمور المتشابهة علما للمعصوم. والمعصوم بين بعض الأشياء لكن كثير منها لم يصل إلينا، فعندما نراجع التفاسير قد لا نجد شيء يبين لنا معنى الطرائق.
أنا ما أريد أخذ الوقت
نعم.
بس يعني هسه لك العلم اكتشف أنه بلايين المجرات.
نعم.
بلايين المجرات.
نعم.
فمن اناقشكم انه نقول 7 سماوات او 7 طرائق، قصدي ما الجواب الجواب ما راح يكون شورت يعني
زين. هل القرآن ملزم؟ هل القرآن هل هو كتاب لبيان علم الفلك؟ لا، القرآن كتاب هداية. كتاب الهداية لا يتوقع منه أن يذكر لنا تفاصيل عالم الوجود. ما ذكر لنا حتى التيبل، البريودك تيبل الكيميائية ما مذكورة بالقرآن، يعني القرآن في النقص. لا، القرآن كتاب هداية. فبما أنه كتاب هداية فهذه الأشياء لا يلزم القرآن بذكرها. مشكلة هؤلاء يتصورون القرآن كله يذكر كل شيء، يذكر الكيمياء ويذكر الفيزياء ويذكر الفلك. لا، القرآن أشار إشارات سريعة. فعندما قال 7 سماوات أو 7 طرائق لا يريد أن يقول هذا فقط هو الوجود. هذا اللي هو محل بتعبيرنا محل الشاهد، هذا محل اللي نحتاجه نحن بالنسبة للهداية. أما أنه بلايين الأكوان في أمان الله هاي مذكورة في الروايات الآن. عندنا مثلا بعضها تقول هنالك 12,000 عالم. هاي كيف نفسرها مثلا في هذا 12 عالم؟ ماذا يعني؟ يعني ربما تكون عوالم أخرى، مجرات أخرى، أبعاد أخرى للكون. فالقضية حقيقة ليست بهذه السهولة حتى أننا مثلا نقول القرآن لم يذكر هذا المعنى أو الحديث لم يذكر هذا المعنى. هناك الكثير من الأشياء القرآن لم يشير إليها لأنها ليست ضرورية بالنسبة لهداية الإنسان. The core, the objective of the Quran is guidance. It's not responsible for elaborating on all types of spheres. It doesn't have to get into, for example, all laws of chemistry. It doesn't have to get into all laws of, astronomy and so on and so forth. Whatever is needed for guidance is mentioned. So maybe you will mention a little bit of science here, a little bit of astronomy here, not because it wants to teach us science and astronomy, but because it has a point to make in terms of guiding us to the right path. أحسنت. تفضلوا أختي الكريمة. تفضل.
السلام عليكم.
عليكم السلام.
عفوا عندي سؤال على الأسهم. مثلا متى تنزل الأسهم وانتظرها تنزل؟ مثلا اشتري ومتى تصعد الأسهم أحاول أبيع. زين هل فيها حرمة الأسهم أم لا؟
الأسهم هي كالتجارة حسب الشركة التي تساهمين فيها. إذا كانت الشركة التي تساهمين فيها شركة لا تتاجر بالخمور والمحرمات والأمور يعني التي لا يجوز البيع والشراء، وتتاجر بالأشياء المحللة، فهي لا إشكال فيها. مثلا شركة تتاجر بالتقنية، تتاجر بالكتب، تتاجر بأشياء ليست محرمة، فلا إشكال فيها. The question was about stock market. As long as the stock market that you're investing in does not incorporate unlawful transactions. You're not, for example, buying stocks in liquor companies or usurious transactions, interest-based loans, for example, and you're taking part of that. Or, for example, being part of companies that promote indecency. Of course, all that we cannot put our investments in. We have to only invest in that which is lawful. أحسنتم.
أحسنتم سيدي، جزاك الله خير.
تفضل أبو فاطمة، تفضل عزيزي.
سيدنا ليش بالكون هذا الذين كفروا بالله كفروا والذين آمنوا بالله قلوا؟
نعم. طبيعة الإنسان حجينا الغالي، طبيعة الإنسان مركب من عقل وشهوة. عقل وشهوة. وهذا العقل والشهوة الله تبارك وتعالى خلق العقل وخلق الشهوة. لا، مو الشهوة وليس الشر، الشهوة الديزاير، الغريزة الديزاير بالضبط. الله تبارك وتعالى خلقها ليمتحن الإنسان. يعني مثلا إنسان أنت تعطيه أموال، الأموال يقدر هو يصرفها بالخير ويقدر يصرفها بالشر. الله مكنه من قوة الشهوة وقوة العقل وأراد له أن يوظفها بالاتجاه الصحيح. أغلب الناس للأسف يضعفون أمام شهواتهم فيوظفونها بالاتجاه الغير صحيح، لذلك كثر الذين كفروا وقل الذين آمنوا. قضية اختيار، البشر يختارون ذلك للأسف.
يعني إذا الشر والخير
من الله، لكن البشر هو الذي يختار. الله يعطيك الطريق، يعني أنت الآن تبين الشخص طريق، تقول له هذا منا الطريق يوديك إلى المكان الذي تحلم به، وهذا الطريق يوديك إلى الهاوية، إذا مشيت عليه ستقع وتموت. هو الإنسان بكيف اختار راح في هذا الطريق. يكون الله أراه الخير وراه الشر، بس هو اختار أن يذهب في طريق الشر، فيكون هو المسؤول عن قراره وخياره. نعم أحسن الله عليكم حياكم الله. نعم yes
Assalamualaikum.
Yes وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله.
So my question is related to the stock market. So I'm not sure how invested you are in the stock or how knowledgeable you are in the stock market. But
I don't invest, so I wouldn't know, but I have general information. Yeah.
So my first question is trading banks haram?
Trading banks. Trading banks.
Yes.
Which means you're borrowing money.
No, yeah, like buying stock of a bank.
Okay, buying stock of a
JP
bank.
Morgan.
Sure. So when you buy stock of a bank, here's two scenarios. Scenario one, you know you're content that 99% or more of the people who are taking the loans from that bank are non-Muslim. If that's the case, there's no issue in that transaction according to Sayyid Sistani. Some fuqaha say no, it's still a problem because you're still dealing with interest. Sayyid says because you can take interest from non-Muslims, you can't give it, but you can take it. Then therefore, if the people who are borrowing from that bank are non-Muslims, then it's not. The second scenario is the problematic one, is if you know that your investment will involve money that is being taken by a Muslim from that bank. This is where now you're going to take interest from a Muslim in this investment and you're going to be falling in that issue. So I would stay away from it to be on the safe side. But if you're content, good no, 0.0001% chance that there's a Muslim who will be part of this transaction that I'm investing in and that he would be the one borrowing the loan and I am the one taking interest from him.
Okay, and then my second question is sort of related to that. So in the stock market, there's sectors that you can trade into. Like for example, there's a technology sector. There's not hundreds, but there's many sectors, and one of those sectors is the S&P 500.
Which means
the S&P 500 includes 500 companies, and those companies are basically like Apple, Tesla, or not. It doesn't include Tesla, but Apple, JP Morgan, and there's a lot more others. And there's basically what it is basically like a fractional amount of that company, like a small portion of that company is all under one index called the S&P 500. And I was wondering if that, let's say one of those companies is a haram company, would that make the entire trade?
Yes, because think of it like this. When you're trading and investing, think of it like a store and you're partnering with the owners of the store. And the owners say, look, we sell all kinds of stuff. We sell good stuff and bad stuff. Yeah, we have a small section of alcohol, but the rest of the stuff is all good stuff. You're still a partner in that alcohol. You're a partner in everything because you're buying stock not from a specific company. You have 500 embedded in that package that you're buying. So therefore, you want to make sure that all these companies that you're dealing with don't incorporate or involve haram. That's why in these cases, I would stay away from that type of transaction. Some people are in the mindset that it's like I am in it, I can't, it's a wajib. It's wajib to be in the stock market. So they say, well, we have to have a solution. No, we don't have to have a solution because it's not wajib that you enter the stock market from the start, right? It's, yes, you want to do trading. If there's halal trading, great. There's no halal trading, I find other means and alternatives.
Perfect. And I'm sorry, my last
question. No problem.
Three-part
sure.
Question. So when you trade a stock, you have two options. You can either go for a long or a short, and a long is basically saying that you think the stock will do well. Like for example, JP Morgan. I bring this example because
sure.
So you can say it's going to do well, or you can say that this company will decrease in value, or it will do bad, for example. And my question is there a difference in whether like the money you make from that is halal or not?
No,
Guessing.
Yeah, there's no problem in guessing, but are you being paid for guessing?
No, sorry, that's not my exact question. Sorry, let me make it more clear. So it's not for. So what I'm basically doing is not exactly guessing. Rather, it's an educated play, or it's like a hypothesis.
Okay, hypothesis. But how are you receiving the money based on a hypothesis?
So I do something called options.
Option trades.
Yeah.
Yeah, but when you do option trades, what are you actually doing? Are you buying something?
Yes.
Are you selling something?
You're buying 100 contracts of one company.
Okay, and you're buying them because you anticipate they're going to sell. fast, or they're gonna increase.
Yes.
Yeah, that's business, right? You buy them with hope that they're gonna increase. Now, what happens when they don't increase? So you lose basically, right?
Yes.
So it becomes like any other transaction in business. You're entering into a safqa, into a deal. You suppose that deal is gonna do good, but it ends up not doing good. So it goes back to the same principle. As long as it's not incorporating unlawful forms of trade, then it remains permissible. Assalamu alaikum.
I forgot my third question.
Yes.
That was a good also follow-up question, but I forgot my third question, so I'll have to get back to you about that.
No. Inshallah, no problem, no problem. Inshallah.
Good question.
تفضل أبو رامي.
شكرا عليك. بارك الله فيك سيدنا. بالنسبة للكتاب الله العظيم والقرآن والعلم يطابق خاصة الوقت هذا والاكتشافات قاعد تصير. تثبت وجود الكتاب هذا والعلوم الموجودة.
بالفعل نعم، إذا تأمل فيها الإنسان بالفعل هي تثبت، لكن كما قلنا النظريات قابلة للدحر والتغيير. كلام عن الحقائق العلمية، الحقائق العلمية نعم تثبتها الآيات القرآنية. أحسنت.
والسبع طبقات وسبع الأرض والسماء موجودة.
نعم. توجد دراسات حول هذا.
ما أعرف ليش المهم سؤالي السبعة يستعملوها طواف عن الكعبة سبعة أيام
بالأسبوع.
سبعة.
ربما أكو سر في هذا الرقم، أكو أسرار في الأرقام لا نعلمها، كالأربعين، 40 له سر، 40 ليلة، 40 سنة، 40 لها سر لا نعلم. قضية الأرقام فيها أسرار لا نعلمها، الله هو العالم بها. السبعة، لاحظ، الصلوات الخمسة، عدد الركعات، هاي كلها عبارة عن نظام أرقام، نظام فيه دلالات. التسبيحات، تسبيح الزهراء 34 33، هذه كلها لها أسباب لا ندركها، أشبه بالكودز، أشبه بالكودات التي يعني تفتح أقفال في الكون لا نعلم حقيقتها، لكن الله هو الذي علمنا بها وأراد منا أن نلتزم بها بهذا الشكل. هي بالنتيجة أسرار لا ندركها إلا أن يفهمنا المعصوم عليه السلام. وبكم إن شاء الله. Any other questions from the respected sisters? Oh yes, sister back there has a question. Mustafa, the sister has a question in the back.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
The other day you mentioned something about praying to the imam of the time.
For the imam of the time, I said. Yeah.
Imam of the time.
Yes.
And I was just wondering what the niyyah would be.
You mean like when you make dua for the imam?
Or like when you start the salah, what the intention would be.
Praying. Okay, but for the imam, did I mention a prayer for the imam alayhi salam? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. To gift, ahsantum, to gift the 2 rak'ah for the imam. So your intention is that I'm gifting this salah to my beloved imam alayhi salam. And you don't have to say it. Intention in general, you don't have to say it. It's something that you know within your heart. So if somebody were to say, why are you performing these 2 rak'ahs? Is it salat al-subh? Say, no, I'm doing this because I want to gift it to my imam. As long as you have that thought in mind, that's enough to be inshallah correct and accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Okay, thank you so
You're
much.
welcome. You're welcome. Assalamu alaikum. Any questions on your side? No?
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen.
Menti, you have a question? حتى ما يصير بال الأخوات أو الإخوة لا بأس نقراها بسرعة ونمر عليها إن شاء الله، بس إذا كان به تكرار ممكن نختصر في الجواب.
It says, is it permissible to record a conversation between yourself and another person without their permission?
No, you need their permission because when they talk to you, they were under the assumption that this is a private conversation, and therefore when you go disclose it, that's a problem. Yes, go ahead.
It says when someone dies and the body is buried, the body will decompose. Why is there emphasis on visiting the graves?
Because there's a riwayah or a hadith that say that the ruh will always come back and visit that grave or is closer to that place. How is it close? We don't know, but it sees us when we come near the grave to visit.
Okay. Do we know the location of Imam Mahdi Ajalallah Ta'ala Farajah and Nabi Isa alayhi salam?
Isa, according to some riwayat, he's in the fourth heaven or one of the heavens. As far as Imam al-Hajj alayhi salam, he could be anywhere on earth, but we don't know exactly where he is.
Okay. Number one, is it okay to go through your kids' belongings or phones for the sake of making sure they're not doing anything wrong?
If it is only for that purpose and it's not just for the sake of spying and you fear something and you're trying to suspect, to make sure they're okay, then to that extent for the parents it's permissible.
Okay. Again, to the makeup. So is the makeup a public sin then?
Yes, it's a public sin. Some way, because when people wear that which cannot be worn in public, they're basically publicly disclosing something that is sinful.
هل يجوز شرعا منع الزوج زوجته العمل خارج المنزل؟
يجوز له أن لا يأذن لها في الخروج. هي حق الزوج على زوجته أن لا تخرج بغير إذنه. لا يجب عليها أن مثلا يجوز له أن يمنعها من ممارسة الأشياء المحللة، لكن لو أرادت أن تخرج هو له الحق أن يستعمل هذا الحق. يقول أنا مثلا لا أسمح بالخروج، أما يقول أين تذهب أين لا تذهب هذا ليس له من هذه الناحية، لكن ما له هو أن تخرج أو لا تخرج. فإذا أراد أن يمنعها هو يرى أن هذا فيه مصلحة مثلا أو بينهما اتفاق، لا بد أن تتجاوب معه في هذا المعنى.
يعني ممكن تشتغل
from home. Yes, she can work from home. He can't stop her from doing that because she's not violating his haqq. As long as she's not using his own property without his permission. For example, he has, let's say, a room and he pays for that room, he pays for the whole house, and he says you can't use that room to do your business, and she says no, I'll still use it, and that would be a problem, of course.
Okay. إذن هل يجوز شرعا؟
الخروج بغير إذنه لا يجوز. الخروج من البيت. مو العمل ما له علاقة. هي بعد هو مجرد قال لا تخرج, not to leave the house, that is a right that Allah has given him.
السلام عليكم. ما الفرق بين الصدقة وبين الزكاة والخمس؟ وهل هم يستحكمون الصدقة ومن هم يستحكمون الصدقة والزكاة والخمس؟ يستحقون.
نعم. العبادات المالية هذه عنوانها كلها charity or religious dues. العبادات المالية منها الخمس ومنها الزكاة بأنواعها، زكاة الفطرة وزكاة إلى آخر الغلات، ومنها الصدقات المستحبة. هذه كلها عبادات مالية. أما الصدقات المستحبة فيجوز إعطائها إلى كل مؤمن، بل حتى غير المؤمن وغير المسلم. المستحبة ما دام ليس محاربا للإسلام يجوز إعطاء الصدقات له. أما الخمس فمصرفه هو قسمان، قسم لسهم الإمام يعطى إلى المرجع أو من يتوكل عنه أو من يأذن بصرفه أو باستلام الأموال عنه، والقسم الثاني السادة الفقراء من بني هاشم من الموالين لأهل البيت عليهم السلام. هذا بالنسبة للخمس. أما بالنسبة لزكاة الفطرة فزكاة الفطرة تعطى للاثني عشرية، الفقراء المساكين. هؤلاء إذا كانوا من السادة لا بد أن يكون المعطي لهم من السادة، أما إذا كانوا ليسوا من السادة فيجوز أن يعطيهم السيد وغير السيد على حد سواء.
ما المقصود بفلك الحمد من مقتدر لا يغلب الواردة في دعاء جوشن كبير؟
فلك الحمد يعني all praise belongs to you. الحمد والثناء كله لك، أنت مستحق لكل الحمد والثناء. يا شنو اللي بعدها؟
من مقتدر لا يغلب. الواردة في الدعاء.
من مقتدر يعني هو يصف الله بأنه مقتدر لا يغلب. يقول له إلهي أنت قدير وقادر ولا أحد يغلبك، فلك الحمد على هذه العظمة وعلى هذه الصفات وغيرها. من هذا الباب. نعم.
Last question, and we'll conclude here. It says, I have a follow-up question regarding visiting the grave. How do we know that while visiting the grave, the soul actually comes back and sees us?
That's something that we don't know, right? That's when we visit, we hope, inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would allow the soul to be there or to hear us or to live. Maybe as soon as we come, they come. We don't know, because the way that this system works after death is very unknown to us. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us all the tawfiq and the success, to have rahmah and mercy upon all of our loved ones in Marhameen. Once again, if I have offended anybody, I apologize, inshallah. This community has been a great community. May Allah give you more prosperity, more success, and inshallah until we meet you again, we ask you all to forgive us and make dua inshallah for us, as we will also make dua for you and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless you with all of his mercies and early Eid Mubarak to you all, inshallah. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad.
بارك الله فيكم
ان شاء الله موفقين ان شاء الله. شكرا لكم جزيلا وانتم احسنتم كذلك. الله يحفظكم الله يبارك فيكم ان شاء الله. احسنتم. Thank you so much. Allah bless you inshallah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.